Alright, here we are. This is Monster Hunter World. It's just a simple little guide for weapon crafting, armor crafting, and item management. Three pretty important things in the game that if you're not familiar with games like these or other games of this nature, they can be a little tricky. Most important thing to know right off the bat, there is no inherent level up system in this game. You don't get stronger just by smacking a monster in the head. The only way to get stronger is to make better gear. Your armor and your weapon damage are all dependent on your gear, so you want to make sure you're constantly upgrading it to be able to fight the stronger monsters out there. So you're going to end up talking to this dude a lot. And blah blah, nobody cares. So the two tabs you're probably going to end up using most are Forge equipment and Upgrade equipment. There's also this one for making the Palico equipment. It does legitimately help, but more often it's kind of just an aesthetic thing, and it works really the same way as the other tabs. So I'm just going to explain the top ones, and then you can play around with this one at your leisure. Anywho, Forge equipment. Weapons, armor, you won't have charms unlocked early in the game, but that does show up later, and those add extra skills and other nice benefits later on. Once you get into high rank, that really expands, but right now that's not even a thing you need to worry about, so don't worry about it. We'll start with weapons. Go here. This is the one that my friend was using. So when you're in the item crafting screen, it's going to start showing you this list. And I mean, this list is decent. It definitely shows things that you can make from scratch right away, which is great. But the problem is you don't really know anything else about these weapons aside from their inherent damage and their cost. And once you get later in the game, you really want to make sure you're preparing. When you go to make an item, you want to make sure you know what it can grow into later so that it fits your play style and your build style. So building your items from the tree is best. From here you could see the starts of each individual tree, and then you could follow the branches for how you can possibly upgrade it later. And you can learn about the associated element types and stuff like that. So I would definitely recommend using this page when going to craft items, just because it will help you later on in the game, as opposed to any of the other tabs. So we'll just start here. If you're early in the game, you've probably only got the ore and bone tree unlocked. As you get later on, put down other monsters, move through the story, more trees become unlocked, more options become available. It's just how it goes. So we'll just start here with a simple ore one. On the right side, you could see it explains the stats of the weapon on the far right side, the attack damage. Right now that's red because compared to the hammer I'm swinging, that's garbage damage, but you'd want to just look for green numbers. That means this weapon would be doing more damage than the weapon you've equipped. Sharpness doesn't apply on ranged weapons. It's something you'll need to worry about for melee weapons. Affinity, it's kind of a tricky stat that doesn't make sense right away. In the early part of the game, it isn't a huge deal. Later in the game, it's more important. Basically, it's like critical hit chance. And if you upgrade it enough, you can get to like a high 100% critical hit chance. Just beware, some weapons have negative affinities, which means they have less of a chance of performing critical hits. So it's just something to keep in mind. It's not a huge deal early game if your weapon has a low affinity. In fact, a lot of them will have low affinities early in the game. It's something just to keep in mind more when you get to high rank and up. So we're looking at the materials. There in that little under the picture, it shows we need 1 iron, which I have plenty of. And then under that, it shows the required money cost, which is 200, and I've totally got that. So we're gonna just make this one. Yes, I'm sure. Hey boys, get to work! Yeah, boys! Yeah, we're gonna put some stuff in the pot. Swing that hammer. He's gonna swing that hammer, and oh, there we go. We got a gun. Look at that. And no, I don't want to equip it now. But if this was a better weapon, you would. So that's how that works. Let me show you armor. Armor's pretty much the same way. Again, you probably don't have as many unlocked if you're early game, but this list fills out, and even an entire another list unlocks once you get to high rank. So just as you keep going through the game, you'll unlock more things. Best thing to note about armor is when you're in low rank, the only thing you really want to worry about on your armor is the defense stat. That's really the most important thing early on. Each piece of armor does have an associated skill with it, but it's only something you'll want to start putting into heavy consideration during high rank. So for right now, just concern yourself with the defense rating on each armor. So if you're still running around in the armor they gave you with at the very beginning of the game, just to give you an example, both of those have 2 armor. And as you can see, even some of the early ones like Bone, Hunters, and even Bug, these have pretty significant armor improvements. Some of this one's all the way up to 12 just for the base. So coming back here regularly to make new pieces of armor is highly recommended. Again, money cost, material cost, you have to make sure you have all the stuff you need to make it, but if you do, the guy starts swinging. Armor definitely requires a lot more materials to make than a baseline weapon does, so I'm not really interested in wasting any of this stuff here, but you get the idea. Now for the upgrade screen. So from here, the screen brings you to all the equipment that you own, and you can start upgrading. So we'll start with that little cannon that we just had. So again, this cannon was based in the ore tree, meaning we can choose one of these different branch ways to start upgrading this thing. Now let me take a look. So I guess it doesn't really matter, this is just for show, but so when you look at it here, the little orange box in the corner of the one on the far left, it shows that that's the one we have equipped, and that's what we're currently working on. The picture to the right of it is the next one it can be upgraded to. It has a cost for upgrading, both material and money. If you have them, you say yes, and bam, upgraded. Do I want to equip it now? No, I like my hammer. And as you see, you get further on, the required materials get more numerous, and the cost goes up. So you really want to make sure you're planning out what you want your weapons to be before you just start pouring money into them. That's why I was saying before to look at the tree so that you know what you're investing into before you get into it. But yeah, coming back and regularly upgrading your weapons is crucial to the game to make sure you're pumping out damage that can be on tier with the monsters you're running into. The same thing can be done for armor. As you complete quests, you'll earn items called armor spheres, and as you move on in the game, you'll earn different classes of armor sphere, which upgrade your weapon, which upgrade your armor faster than others. I would say if you're in low rank, try to save your armor spheres, just make brand new baseline armor, and move on from there to get the better armor buffs. And try to pool up as many armor spheres as you can for when you get into high rank, because that's where you're really going to want to start deciding your end game gear, and then you can start pouring all your armor spheres into upgrading the stuff you like. So just to show you how this works, so clearly I've got a lot of different kinds of armor spheres here, but you just select one with X. That's how many you want to devote to upgrading this. I'll just say one of this because it's the type I have. Under the little picture of the armor piece there, it shows that little green bar. It contributed 1 point towards that thing's level up, and it needs another 19 points before it actually levels up. So normal armor spheres on my endgame gear would take forever. Luckily I have this one, the hard armor sphere, which is worth 80 points per piece. So I'm going to put one in here, and then look at that, it was like it gave a whole bunch of levels all at once. So there will be different ranks of armor spheres that you'll get. So just keep that in mind. But like I said, I'd recommend saving them more than spending them any time before high rank. So that's really the important stuff here. Now to go to item management. This one, it took me a little while to figure out. I mean, it's not inherently hard. It's basically the game just doesn't give you a whole lot of information on explaining it, and items become pretty key once you get into the field and start working. So there's a few things about this I'll explain. First thing I would recommend is go to this under the Start tab, the Customize Radial Menu. The Radial Menu is outrageously helpful for organizing the different tools and items that you might want to use during the game. So go here. For me, I've customized mine into recovery, traps, tools, and communication. And in each wheel you can see I've assigned different things that I want to use under various circumstances. You can design yours any way you want. You can rename the tabs as you want, such things. So, just to give you an example, I'll clear this out. You can clear them out with square individually as you spin around the right stick. Then you can just push X on an empty one and it takes you over here. In this area, it's displaying all items you've ever unlocked or used. So you can, so you can assign them, and right here, this is just like all general items. Next is ammo and coatings. If you are devoted to using a gun, I would definitely recommend probably setting up an entire Radial Menu tab just for the different bullets and kinds of gun ammo you intend to use. I don't go down that road. I swing the hammer, so I'm not overly familiar with it, but my guess is it would probably be a good idea to have a whole tab just assigned to that. Special items. Whetstones, capture nets, fishing rods, barbecue spits, and then later in the game you'll get, I think they're called specialized tools. I can't remember the exact word they use for it, but they're neat little trinkets that give random buffs depending on what you have. I would strongly recommend assigning all of these to your Radial Menu, an exception being the whetstone if you are just using a gun, because again, they don't need to worry about sharpness. But the rest of these are all fairly useful. They're infinite use, so you don't have to worry about breaking them if you use them on accident, and getting to them quickly from the Radial Menu is often pretty convenient and nice. No, not that. We're not going to worry about that. And then the rest of these are like gestures, because your people can do like silly stuff. Oh gosh, I pushed wrong buttons. Put that back. I don't want to break that. So, yeah, not gonna worry about that. Not gonna worry about that. Stickers, little tags and whatnot. Not everybody does. I'm not sure if everybody does this, but I would personally recommend assigning the Fire SOS flare to a tab slot on one of your wheels. Because a lot of the way the levels work, especially when you're playing the story, you have to go through the story for a little bit before it allows you to fire this thing. And basically what happens is, you go to find the monster, it shows you a cinematic of the monster, and then all of a sudden, you're standing there, and the monster's standing right on top of you, and it's pissed off. So you have to try to barrel roll out of the way, and you have no backup. I mean, this isn't always a huge deal if you totally know what you're doing, but if you're going in blind on a monster, or if you're not sure your gear's up to snuff, it's a little terrifying. So I assign this thing to one of my tabs so that as soon as that cinematic ends and I roll out of the way, I can bring that up, click it, and get that flare fired off right off the bat. It doesn't necessarily mean any players will join, but it does at least open my game to be fully joinable to as many people as possible as early as I can possibly do it. So I would definitely recommend them looking at that. Crafting list. This is another important thing. The game does a halfway decent job of explaining it, but there are some other things that you need to know. Now, as you wander around the world in the levels and whatnot, you'll run into various little plants. Like, for example, the herbs. Now, The game does do you a solid, and I believe both potions and health potions are set to auto-craft by default. But there are a number of other very useful items that the game does not set to auto-craft for you. And personally, I would recommend it, but it's totally your choice. Anywho, at any time, you can also just manually go into this crafting tab and craft items yourself, assuming you have the materials. Basically, it works, just like the weapons crafting or armor crafting does, except there's no money. You're basically just combining simple raw ingredients into simple items. So like potions, literally it only takes an herb plant and it makes 2 potions. So you get plenty of those, but they don't heal very well. So it's always recommended to combine the made potions with some honey to get mega potions. Those heal decently. Those are good. Those will help keep you alive. So yeah, looking through this list of available craftables and learning what they do and how they fit your playstyle, I would strongly recommend. Next thing to talk about is item sets. This is something the game didn't really explain, and I kind of had to piece it together for myself. So it kind of sucks, but on the same time, because I pieced it together myself, I really was able to figure out exactly what I wanted for each situation. So on the left, you can see the item pouch. Item pouch is not infinite in space. You've only got, looks like 24. You can hold 24 items and then 16 pieces of ammo, or stacks of ammo. So it's not infinite, meaning you want to make sure you're using this available space as wisely as you can. Now, anytime you go out and gather materials like herbs or other random mushrooms and stuff, they're going to sit in your item pouch unless you manually tell the game that you do or do not want these in there, which can really suck. It can be kind of time consuming. The best thing I would recommend is making a loadout. So if you push the options button, it's going to bring up this loadout tab. And what you have to do is you have to initially fill up your item pouch with the things that you do want, and once you found the stuff that you do want, then you push the manage loadout tab and it brings this up, and then you would push triangle and it would register the loadout. From then on, all you would have to do is go back into the manage loadouts tab and you can push X on the loadout that you want, like the one that I've assigned before. I go yes, and the cool thing that this does is it gives you all items that you had assigned in that loadout that are missing, and it takes away all items that are not assigned in this loadout. It makes it for very good, super fast inventory management to ensure you're always carrying the stuff you decided that you wanted to carry. Like for me, I've got mega potions, max potion, ancient potion, and other things and so on. This is what works for me. This might not necessarily be what works for everybody. It's a thing that everybody needs to kind of figure out and play with on their own to decide what works for them. Wait, I don't need these anymore. I need to assign the loadout. There we go. Alright. Let's see. What else? Okay, we'll go into changing equipment. So on the off chance you made a piece of equipment and you didn't go equip now from the screen where you made it, you can go into any of these item boxes, and there's like a number of them scattered around town. There's one here, there's one at the gate, there's one in your house, then there's technically one both at the armor salesman and at the smithy himself. So there's plenty of opportunities to do it, but go to change equipment, and from here it brings up the list of your various equipment slots for both armor and weapons, and you can just select it and go, no, I want to carry something different. There's the gun we made earlier. I'll just put it on for 2 seconds. There's the gun. Woo! That can now never manage to kill any monster that I'm currently fighting. Hooray! Back to my hammer. Alright. I believe that should be a good baseline explanation of item management and basic crafting. Hope this helped, and thanks everybody.